Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Evil Within 2. Nightmare difficulty, no upgrades, no damage, no keys, no everything. And this is the second part of Chapter 3, Resonances. We've just picked up our first explosive bolt. Explosive bolts in this game are really, really good. Really, really good. If you lay them as a trip mine, it will knock an enemy down, oftentimes killing it. If it doesn't kill it, you can then stamp on their head because they're on the ground. If you hit an enemy directly with it, this is mostly the bosses that I've used it on, it will give them a stunned animation. So you can effectively stun lock bosses by just shooting them, which is pretty cool. It's actually really, really good. As I stare at this Union security guard and press the wrong button, not too bad. All you need to do is take whatever the number is on the door and then translate it to that card. It's very simple. It's good stuff. I like the puzzles in this game. They are not as ambitious or as unique as they were in the first game. But let's face it, the puzzles in the first game weren't exactly mind twisters, or they weren't going to bamboozle you. They were there to put you into a situation where you could do something quite gruesome. Whereas in this game, there's a couple of turning pipes and stuff, and twisting this and popping that and what have you, getting all creative. But for the most, they serve a function of just breaking up certain areas, and I really appreciate them. They're simple, they're interesting, they're perfectly fine. They're not offensive. The best thing I can say about them is they're not offensive, and a lot of them are quite creative. But did you see? That's your trap. That right there is as close to the traps as you're going to get. You trip on something, it either sets off a car alarm, or it sets off one of those, and that gave us ammunition, so that's the best trap in the world. And then we get to take on the Lost here. So, he's going to walk over there, we're going to double check to make sure that there's nobody being sneaky, and then we're going to see what he's going to do. So right now, he's... So this is an interesting pattern here, because this guy is moving a lot through the room instead of looking around. And because he is being so aggressive, we're going to be aggressive too. Stab him in the head, put him down, and then proceed to try and pick something up off that shelf and drain the gel instead. So we get another explosive bolt. There's more parts over here. It would have been really cool if you could break the weapon parts down into gunpowder or into something specific. That would have been cool. It'd be nice if they gave us an option when we're not upgrading to do something and make it, something useful. But there is a shotgun shell. The shotgun is amazing, folks. Please use the sawn-off. Please use it. If you like the normal one, that's fine. But I'm telling you, there's a cheeky jump scare coming up here. If you go near these boxes, he's going to smack them, but he's not going to do anything. I really didn't understand what this was about, and it didn't scare me either. And then the boxes disappeared, and then it was just like, what are we doing? We're staring at each other at the other side of this stack of bags of flour or whatever the hell this is, cement or something. And then he walks off. So I'm going to slowly march after him, and I'm going to enter his brain with my knife. Like some kind of cerebral pornography. And that's interesting too. I don't really understand why he stabs him in the side before he stabs him in the head. It must be some kind of balance conceit to make that animation just long enough that you can't do it really, really quickly and then do it to somebody else. They want it to feel quite tense because you're struggling rather than just stab him in the head, 2 seconds, done. So instead he wastes a bit of time. But I'm assuming if you don't kill that guy and you touch that, it's going to spawn the dude behind you anyway. And I think that's what the scary moment's supposed to be. But you'll notice, I don't trust anything in this game, so I'm assuming that there's enemies in the boxes, I'm assuming that there's enemies waiting to be everywhere. I'm going to get surprised by an enemy in this video, and I'd never ever seen this before. Because one of my criticisms of this game is that I don't think that they managed the enemies' diversity as well as they did in the first game. There's a lot of different enemies, and I still think it's head and shoulders above most games these days. But the first game had you fighting something different in almost every section, and I really enjoyed that. Whereas this game, it kind of rested on its laurels a few times, and then threw some new stuff, and then rested on its laurels, and so on and so forth. And the weird dog enemy, I just thought was underused, because you see it in this chapter. You can completely avoid the first encounter, which is what we're going to do, because they suck. Then you fight 3 of them, and then I didn't see another one of those creatures until, chapter 13 or something. Until the bottomless pit, I think it was. So, one new exclusive enemy, and you see it twice in the full game, or 3 times, it didn't make sense to me. And then I saw a cutscene on my recording run of this that I didn't see the first time I played, where they summon a bunch of new enemies after you've done the looking for Lily sequence, And those weird dog things are part of the enemies that spawn. And because of the path that I took through the city, I never went near where they were, so I never saw them again, and I never bumped into them, and I never encountered them. But in this walkthrough that I made, I'm going to do exactly that. And it's a terrifying moment where something can see me, something's making a lot of noise, but I don't know what's happening. The music's going nuts, but I can't see a single thing. And then I gradually look up with the camera, and it's in the tree. It was a wonderfully chilling moment that I managed to capture, and it's in the walkthrough. Oh, a little tip as well, folks. Whenever you go on that train, bad things happen. Shit comes from behind you. There's always some kind of crazy trap. I avoid it like the plague. There's plenty of stuff you can get from it, but to me, I don't need it, and it's just not worth it. If you want to do it, feel free, get your sen in there, but I'm in no rush to go on that train again. So I just give it a wide berth. But this is us getting out of the warehouse. We're going to be going back towards the auto repair area. We're doing this because we need to get the new pistol, because I'd never seen it before and I wanted to use it. And it leads us to the most controversial part of this walkthrough. So, to pick this pistol up, you have to go through a quick time event with a zombie. The quick time event is almost impossible on Nightmare to do without taking damage. It is mandatory damage that happens in a cutscene, and thus I'm not counting it. I'm not even showing it in this video. I'm just going to skip from picking the gun up to having the gun, because it's one of those bits that really fucks me off, because I tried about 5 or 6 times, and I mentioned this earlier, I believe. I don't know how well I went into detail, but suffice to say, guys, I mashed A and D harder than anything I've ever mashed in my entire life, and I have a K70 rapid-fire keyboard with Cherry MX switches. These are the most responsive switches on the planet, and I'm hitting the fuck out of them, and I still take residual damage. I plug in a controller, I mash the analog, practically breaking the stick. It would have got me out of any grab in Resident Evil 4 without being bitten. In this game, nothing, still took damage. Got my fight stick, held 2 buttons with rapid fire on, still took damage. So the consensus is on Nightmare, for whatever reason, this particular exchange will always damage you. It is mandatory damage, unless you don't pick up the gun. So, boom! We now have a fancy new gun, and I didn't take any damage, because I'm the best player in the world, and you never saw it, right? But I'm being honest, that's what happened. It's bullshit, I can't control it. That's the only part of the game where I took damage, except for at the very beginning, which was another piece of bullshit mandatory damage. So yeah, it can go suck a big fat meaty dick. But the pistol's pretty interesting, because the pistol's a massive homage to Resident Evil 4. It is a laser sight pistol, and the laser sight pistol... Ooh, animation cancel. That looked awesome. I don't know how I did that, the game's just weird. But the gun is really, really good for certain things. It's good when you don't have any kind of fire around you, and when you don't have whitewashed, bleak-looking, blown-out visuals. When you have those two things, you can't see the laser, and thus your accuracy goes to shit. But if you're in that situation, feel free to swap to your other pistol with a hard, with the hard reticle on it. Or even on the PC menu, go into the PC menu and put the center dot on. Maybe the center dot will help you aim, because you can do that, but I found it so annoying, because it's there all the time, so I turned it off. But here we have a new enemy. I don't really know what this enemy is called. She's a Smelly Cow, and she screams a lot. So, do with that what you wish. But the one thing I know about this creature is it takes 2 backstabs to kill it. Because if you go behind it and stab it, it'll do a fancy animation and it won't die. So you have to kill it in the same way you do the witches. But I never ever fight this enemy. It's just not an enemy I encounter enough to fight. I always move away from it. And what it does is it walks around moaning, and then when it sees you, it thinks it's competing in the Olympics, and it suddenly finds out that it can shuffle a little quicker. And then it'll shuffle all the way towards where you are, and then it will scream, alerting all the local lost to where you are to get them all running your way, and it also gets rid of all your stamina. So when she screams, it will drain your stamina to empty, to make it more difficult for you to run away. But you'll never have a problem with this enemy, because every place that she is, we're going to be able to get away from her, and we're not even going to engage. So in here, we're going to be finding the broken sniper rifle parts, and then we're going to be stabbing that dude in the head, because he's a monster, and we don't like monsters. Very xenophobic. But there he goes, hoping he'll drop some gunpowder. I think he did, actually. Metal pipes will make crossbow bolts, the Harpoon Launcher bolts. There's the snipper. And the Harpoon is one of your most powerful, most damaging tools, but it's also one of the trickiest ones to use, because it has a bit of a parabolic arc, and it can be a little bit tricky getting it to full tension when you hold the trigger. Because they still have that problem in this game that they had in the first game, where when you're trying to panically shoot the crossbow, there are times when you let go of the trigger and it doesn't fire. It's only done it to me twice, but it's one of those things that I remember from the first game, and you just don't forget that, because it's always in the most inopportune moments when that shit happens. So just be careful. And if you're wondering how to get... if you're aiming and you've got a bolt that's fully charged and you don't have anything to shoot, or your opportunity's waned, if you let go of aiming, you cannot hip-fire the crossbow. So let go of aiming, and you will not be able to fire the crossbow, even if you release the right trigger. And that will save your bolt, or whatever it is that you're going to fire. Because that happens a lot, and it can be tricky to get it off, because you're just walking around slowly with a fully charged weapon as something smacks you in the teeth. But I've made a conscious effort here, guys, to keep in all my crafting, because I know there's people that are going to be curious as to what I buy and what I use my stuff on, so you're going to get to see that. And my philosophy is this, right? I always get my stuff to 1 away from max. I never max out any of my ammunition. The reason I do this is because I always find the shit I max out. So if you have space for 1, it means if you bump into it in the world, you can actually pick it up, and that's a good thing, right? With the bullets... I can max the bullets out because that's not as important because you use them way more frequently, but always try and have as much sniper rifle and as much shotgun as you can. Those are the 2 weapons that are going to decide everything. And then right now all we're doing is we're waiting for her to turn the other way, and then we're going to exit this area and we're going to run across those hills. She's going to give chase, but she's nowhere near as fast as we are, and we're going to get away from her. And I'm going to get cock-blocked coming up as well, because I'm going to move into the mountainside thinking I can walk over it, and it turns out it's just a huge puddle of collision, and it doesn't work so well for me, so I end up getting in a bit of a spot of bother, which is not so cool. But just wait for her to go back on her path, and we can continue onwards. So it's in this point I should probably talk about the ghost, right? So there's a very interesting side mechanic happening here. That is a side quest that will get you Sebastian's revolver from the first game. And it's worth doing, guys, because there's an interesting thing about this title. When you have multiple weapons, you can have a full clip in each weapon. So it'll enable you to pick up a full clip's worth of extra ammo on top of what you've got. And I don't know if it takes away from your overall ammo pool, but can you hear the laugh just then? The laugh she made then tells us she knows where I am and she's going to chase me. But she has to be close to scream. So as long as you're too far away from her, she will never scream and slow you down. So all we're going to do is keep on running, and then when I turn around, she's already given up the chase. You can tell right now with the audio that she's not following me, and she's going back the other way. So there you go. We didn't even have to fight her. Very simple, very easy. But I'm not too sure if the 2 guns take away from the overall ammo count, but... I look at it like this. I have 2 fully loaded weapons that are the same thing intrinsically that I can swap between instead of reloading. And it's a really good strategy when you have to deal damage quickly, but your opening's only short. And I use it a lot with the shotguns. Have 2 fully loaded shotguns, and you have 6 shells that you can fire off pretty quickly. It's pretty damaging, and it helps a lot. So that's definitely a good reason to get the revolver. On top of that, the revolver is probably one of the most powerful handguns because it says it packs a punch, but it's not very accurate. So it might be an even more damaging choice. So definitely partake in those side quests if you want that. I'm not going to do it because I want to get through this as quickly as I can. This is about efficiency. This is about, path of least resistance. So... what happens is there are certain parts of this area that you go inside, you're going to trigger these dynamic encounters with this creature. I don't know her name. She's kind of a manifestation of your guilt and of your past trauma. And you have to play hide and seek with her until you can get back into the real world. And once you've been introduced to this creature, it will show up anywhere in this area. So at any one time, it can go blue and it can go cold, and it kind of phases you into this specific place where this ghost is. And she will chase you, and I think she instantly kills you in those areas. And this is going to happen a lot. It even happens if you haven't introduced yourself to the ghost. It's going to happen to me later on. And it's one of those mechanics that kind of plays out through the game. But as long as you avoid the areas where it tends to happen, you can generally get away with not bumping into any of the moments. But you will not get the revolver if you do that. There is a silver lining, though, on those moments too. Because on my first path through this game, I moved on the right-hand side of the town the entire time. You know that main road that goes past all those houses and those big estates on the right, just past the armory where we got the shotgun in that house on 322? That road there, it has one witch on it and a bunch of the lost, and whenever you phase into the dimension of the ghost, it seems to get rid of the enemies and it's just you and her. So whenever you phase, as long as you crouch away from the creature and get just the right amount of distance where it can't hear you, you can sprint to where you're going. So it's this wonderful thing of, whenever she turns up, you're supposed to be all scared and all tentative and move really slow, but the secret behind the mirror, or behind the curtain, is that you can actually sprint, because most of the enemies that normally populate that area seem to have handily disappeared. They're still there, some of them, like the witch is still there, and another one's still there, but for the most, you can just get on with your life, and just sprint to where you need to go with no resistance whatsoever. So those super tense moments, once you understand how they work, and once you make sure that she's behind you, going in a house or something, doing a little singy-songy bullshit, you can just sprint the other way and you're fine, and she will never chase after you, because it's not unfair. And it's funny how it works, because it is 100%, she just does her own thing. Whereas later on, when you go do the stealth section with Obscura, and you do the stealth section with the first boss, whose name I don't understand, the one with all the faces, those enemies know exactly where you are the entire time, and they do that bullshit, I'm going to pretend that I don't know where you've gone, and then the moment you walk too far away from me, I'm going to come thundering back your way and make all the right turns to find exactly where you are, but just not see you. That shit can die in a fire. That's terrible design. I hate that design. And the first boss has it, Obscura has it, and the Hell Priest has it, the Flame Guy. All three of those bosses pretend to not know where you are and conveniently make the right turns to follow you every single place you go. The Ghost doesn't do that. So the Ghost is a fantastic example of how the AI should work, in my opinion, to make it fun, whereas they've just made it kind of annoying. And you might be wondering, Chris, how do you know that this is a thing? Well, there's so much evidence for it. On the Obscura encounter, where you're running away from her once you stab the painting in, like, Chapter 7, you can stand at the very place the checkpoint puts you, and if you wait, she'll come from the right. She'll come from the right, and it makes you think, well, if she's going to come from the right, I'm going to run to the left. She can't hear me because she's too busy walking forward. So you run to the left, and she's on the left. And you're like, what the fuck is this? This is bullshit. So you try it again, and you crouch walk because you think maybe she heard you, maybe the game's making sense and it's not cheating, and you crouch walk that way, and she cuts you off. So you go, okay, it keeps going left, I'm gonna go right. So you go right, and she's fucking there again. And I'm sorry, but that's just not how the game should be. I can't stand that, ooh, we're gonna pretend to not see you and follow you perfectly garbage. And it's one of those weird pieces of programming that they put in there so that you don't get that lucky pattern where she accidentally turns around and walks over to the sticks 20 years away and never causes an issue. And that's what they're doing it for. They're doing it because they want you to always be in peril and always be facing potential threat. But to me, just design the pattern more interesting. But give it weaknesses, give it gaps. Don't make it so that the moment I get a good opening, she fucking turns around and starts following me when she's over there. Like, that's not fair. That, to me, is just cheating AI, and it happens a lot in this game. But it can 100% be combated, and it can be managed, and you can still have a victory. It's not a problem. But the creepy ghost sequences. So, she's going to track you. She's going to do whatever it is that she does. She's going to turn up randomly. Sometimes when she grabs you, it doesn't kill you. It just does kind of some visual effects on the screen, and then it puts you back in the world. There's also these weird moments where, when she phases you into an instance where the world goes all blue and she turns up, it locks the doors and it stops you from being able to interact with important items. And if you're inside a room when this happens, it locks you in the room. And it can lead to these really funny moments where she can't get in the room for some reason, even though she normally walks through the doors. You can't get out of the room because it locked the door when it instanced you. So the game just leaves you there for a second, and then it phases you out, and it puts you back before you entered the weird realm, and then Sebastian goes, let's try that again, shall we? And it's this weird reset button for where the game fucks up, and I have no idea what it is or why it happens, but I thought it was hilarious. Because it happens in here. This is a main mission right now. What we're doing here, you have to do to beat this chapter. We're following this resonator, these tracks, so that we can look for Lily, and we have to do this. But while this is happening, the game world can go into that other dimension, and when it goes into that other dimension, this stuff can't trigger anymore. And it's one of those weird moments where I think the game just knows that it can put you in kind of a dead end, so it just pulls you out of there. And I think it's really interesting that it does that, but feasibly, if they've designed it to pull you out of a bad situation, just reset the world and break your immersion, couldn't they have designed it so that you didn't get put into those weird corners to begin with? It seems really interesting, and I'm curious if you've had anything goofy happen as well, because one of the best things about anything that's like this, where it is wider in scope and there is choice and there's a lot of dynamic spawning and scripting and triggers happening, is that everybody's going to have their own little story. Everybody's going to have these moments where, oh, I walked over to this part and this happened, and you're going to be like, well, that didn't happen to me, I went to this and I did this and then that happened. And you can have these wonderful emergent gameplay, these emergent stories of what happens. Be careful over here again, guys. Whenever I run past this area, there's always a woman that gets up. So I tend to take this area a little bit slower than I would normally. So you'll notice that I'm not sprinting, I'm just kind of walking. I'm doing his weird dad at a wedding, doesn't quite understand where the toilet is, even though he's accidentally shat himself. Walk of Evil Within 2. But there's the resonator, there goes Lily again. And then we get to follow her. I believe when it goes all black and white like this, that you're not in any threat of bumping into an enemy. It would be kind of mean if you were, because the camera's being taken away from you all the time here, and it's kind of all very dramatic and stylistic as she comes over to this car, and then we ruminate that she's going to go over to the sawmill, or whatever that big building is over there, that repair garage. I don't know what it's called. The thing across from us. And just a show of hands here, guys. How many people on your first playthrough went into the truck stop, the Tready Trucks, or whatever it's called, before you did this mission, and you spent 10 to 15 minutes thinking that you'd missed something or you were an idiot because you couldn't figure out how to get past that clearly obvious panel of wood? So you kicked the barrel towards it, you blew the barrel up on it, you tried to set it on fire, shooting the oil from the barrel, you shot it, you smacked it, you tried climbing on every box, you tried, attacking the fence and all that kind of good stuff, and then it turned out that you went there too early, and it was really a main mission. I find that shit to be infuriating, I really do. Because in my opinion, you shouldn't be able to go inside that place until you do this mission. Because what's the point in letting us inside? It even has a paranormal goofy moment where a light gets pushed over, so it tells you that there's something to be done in that area. It tells you that there's scripting in here, so there's something to be accomplished, but you can never accomplish it because it's a trigger that only happens when you're on this mission. And I find that to be a little bit cheap on the player. Because can you imagine if you're that stubborn guy who spends hours trying to figure it out and shouting and getting really mad, and it turns out you literally cannot do it because you're not in the right section yet? That's the type of stuff that I'm looking forward to when it comes to dynamic game design that we're going to be able to get rid of. Because it's just, there's no place for going somewhere and knowing that you're supposed to do something but not being able to trigger it, and then going and listening to a conversation and then coming back to that said area, and it magically works now. Because if you're wondering, if you've not played the game before, Sebastian takes the panel off himself in a cutscene. So the reason that you can't break it is because you have to go and play the cutscene to do it. But be very careful here, there is a lot of enemies. All we're going to be doing is sneaking up onto this ladder, and then from the ladder we're going to be stabbing an enemy in the head, and then we're going to be taking out the two enemies that are guarding the electricity box. And to do that, we're going to hit them both with the axe. I can tell you from experience that I've ran up to these enemies, they've both stood up, I've swung the axe, and it's only killed one of them. So if you get unlucky with the axe, you're going to have to restart, because fighting two enemies at this close is going to be pretty tricky, so I hope you've got your bottle skills. If not, just get the axe back. The axes are very powerful, but they do fail you, and you need to be aware of this because there's nothing worse than the tools not working as they should. But we're just going to be in this area here, picking up the loot, staring at that egregious run. It's such a funny run. But how are you finding the game, guys? Are you liking it? Is it what you wanted? A lot of people have been asking me my feelings on the game, and it can be tough to tell your feelings when you've just been playing it and you don't really know, enough about the game in its entirety. Like, my gut reaction to the game, having beaten it twice now, I think it's a great game, and I think it's better than the first game, but I prefer the first game. And it's one of those weird things where the first game winds me up to death. It has so much in it that frustrates me, that I wish was different, that I wish was better, and this game in a lot of ways is better. But there's something about just the jankiness and the Japaneseness of the first game that gave it a real charm, and I think that they've lost a lot of that in this. It still has, you know, some of that appeal, but it's a much more functional and much more mainstream game, this one. And in a lot of ways, I think it suffers, because the thing that I really, really liked about the first game was that it felt just so disconnected. It felt almost like a James Bond montage, you know, at the beginning where the ladies are all in fancy colours and they're swimming through shimmering rainbows and there's guns firing and there's all kinds of weird stuff, and none of it makes sense, but you believe it because it's James Bond. The first game reminded me of that. It reminded me of this crazy, dreamlike scape of just every 2 minutes weird faces were turning up, weird men made of blood, weird sunflower fields, weird dude from, you know, Shutter Island voice man, Rorschach or whatever he's called, you know. All of it was kind of goofy and hit and miss, and you could tell that somebody'd put a bunch of ideas that they wanted, a bunch of elements from modern games, and they just threw it in. And half of the stuff that it ended up being was a nightmare. The Hummer with the gun that haunted you for days. Enemies chucking dynamite down at you while you wait for a vehicle to start, and you just have to kind of survive. Horrible moments. Like that stupid monorail sequence with people chucking shit at you and you've got nowhere to move. There was so much goofy, stupid shit in that game, but it definitely had a charm. It really did. You know, it was so goofy and over the top, whereas I feel like this is a much more well-realised, but less crazy and less, you know, helter-skeltery adventure. So from a vision perspective, I think it's way more cohesive, and I think a lot more people are going to prefer it. But I kind of liked the fact that every 2 minutes we were somewhere else doing something stupid. And a lot of it was really stupid, don't get me wrong. It was stuff created to be stupid. It was the Condemned 2 Magic Man level, which is my favourite level in that game. It's cool, so it exists. That's the reason it exists. Whereas in this game, I think that they toned a lot of that down. So there's a lot more, you know, you can play this Gelf. That was an interesting combination of the word game and stealth. But you can play this title almost exclusively via stealth. And there was a lot of sequences in The Evil Within 2 where that just wasn't... with Evil Within 1, well, that's just not the case. You can't do that at all. You know, when you think about all those times where you had to protect people, like get Kidman out of that watery tank thing, and there's you and Joseph, and there's millions of enemies attacking you, and it's super hectic and nightmarish. All those times when you had Joseph with you and he was fucking useless. Whereas the moments in this game, the person that they put with you, it's actually pretty good. You know, they're pretty competent. You can kind of run around and let them do a lot of the work, and they never feel like a burden. So as far as a game goes, it's much more satisfying and much more enjoyable because it works a lot better. But you're missing something, you know, with the goof, I think. So I don't know what it is. It's like a charm thing. There's something endearing about, you know, the problems in that first game, but the ambition of it. Whereas one of the things in this game I find really interesting... Watch this, by the way. We're going to see him disappear because I pushed this angle really quickly. Oh, there he goes. That's lazy, video gamers. You didn't even complete the full path, the little fucking instant transmission dude. He's going to come out the boxes on the other side. Hit him with the axe, guys. There's no reason not to, because this axe is going to disappear. I was saving it for later, but I decided to throw a bottle because I'm swag, and I kill him that way. But even saying what I was saying just then, when I say I prefer the first game, this game is still amazing, and it's still really fun, and it's still got a lot of great stuff to it. It just has. It's just that there's a big void between crazy Beyblade, stupid space hopper blade monster things, and those weird, like, two-headed dudes that were on the floor and hanging from all the racks and turned out to be enemies, or those random 2 giant twins that were a pain in the ass to fight, but there they were. You know, there was so much weird, goofy stuff, like that giant spider crab thing that came out of nowhere for no reason at all, and you're doing on-rail sections, and it was pretty goofy. And then the whole Keeper stuff. The Keeper stuff was amazing. I loved the Keeper. That dude is cool. You know, just lots of goofy stuff in that game that make it really endearing to me. And in this game, did anybody think, you know, when you watch the trailer, and the trailer showed you all that white stuff, and the white stuff was forming faces and forming creatures and dripping everywhere, did you think that was going to be a bigger motif in the game? Because I really did. I thought the world was going to be shaping and shifting itself constantly and turning into white stuff and reforming, and I thought there was going to be a My language today is terrible. Sorry about this, guys. I thought there'd be a ton of monsters that would be created from that. And when you think about it, there's the final boss, and then there's that weird thing that looks at you and grabs your leg like a Dead Space moment. And that's about it. And of course, there is that moment at the end where everything's kind of whitewashed, and that does look cool, and it's all blobby and weird. But I kind of thought that there would be more faces. I thought there'd be way more faces, because it seemed to be a motif that was happening a lot on the artwork, and I was a little bit disappointed that the world wasn't like that towards the end. And the world at the end is kind of cool. I really like, the Limbo level. It's my favourite level in the game, just for the atmosphere and for the visuals. I don't know, I expected a little bit more, I guess. I'm not even going to talk about the last boss and what I wish it was, rather than what it is, because it's just redundant, and we'll talk about it when we're there, because it's really crappy. But I kind of felt that whole... Because the breaking apart and the shifting and the warping is something that, the stem always kind of does. But to kind of separate itself, the first game I felt went with gore. It went with gore, it went with brains, and it went with blood. Which is why the end of that game, all of it is dripping in blood, all of it looks like some membranous tissue, and it looks viscous and nasty and all that good stuff. Whereas this one went more clinical with the white stuff, and I was hoping that it would go a little bit deeper with that. But when it turns up at that part of the game, it feels like the game is way more streamlined anyway, so you're not really doing too much. But food for thought anyway, guys. What did you think? What was your thoughts? What did you like? What did you dislike? Because I pretty much liked all of it, I have my problems with certain mechanics and certain things, but none of it is a dislike. It's more of a, I expected this and I didn't get it. Which is hard to criticize a game, I think. But this is hard coming up, guys. This encounter's pretty tough. So, you can do this encounter without shooting any crossbow to stun these creatures, but it's safer if you do this. So, I fire that there, and I shock those two guys, and then I hit one of them with an axe because I'm a beast. You don't have to do that. You can save the axe, because the strategy here is golden. Once you climb up here, the only way these monsters seem to be able to get on top of this truck is to climb up the front. And when they climb up the front, you want to shoot them in the face, and it'll knock them off. And I keep turning behind because I expect them to come from both sides, but they all keep coming from the front. So feasibly, don't shoot the electricity, don't swing the axe, just run, get on top of here, and do this. But I got jumped at twice when I tried to do that. So that's the reason why I stunned one of them at the beginning. But if you're willing to take a few attempts, this is where I would save as well. If you're going to save at any part of Chapter 3, I would save at this point, so you get another attempt at that fight. But another strategy would be to save the axe, and to save the bolt, fire a smoke grenade at them, run past them, climb up, and then shoot them. And that could be one of the best resource ways of killing them. But the shotgun is so useful. Did you see what happened then as well? I went to pick up the scrap and I climbed up on that thing. That is another thing I don't understand. Why does everything have detection when it shouldn't have detection? Look at floating knife. Randomly floating knife. Best part of the game, right, guys? And I love this little close-up here. Just photo bombs the camera angle like a beast. But it's interesting, this, because it shows that cutscene of all those creatures spawning, and it symbolises that the game's repopulating, because you can actually take out all the enemies and have a barren world before you trigger this. This is me going back for the axe, by the way, but the axe has disappeared. Spoiler alert! So it populates the world with all those dudes, and it looks like they're all on Main Street, right? So you would be thinking in your mind, I'm not going up Main Street, I'm going to go and do a wide berth and go up one of the suburban roads or something like that. Turns out, if you go up Main Street, there's nobody there. There's a couple of the lost, but you can just get back to O'Neill without bumping into anybody. So it's kind of a bullshit cutscene because it's there to scare you off the path and maybe bump into the other creatures. But I get the feeling that they fan out dynamically, so maybe if you get unlucky, you'll bump into a ton of them. But I didn't, and this is the path I've used 2 times through the game now, so I'm just convinced that it's the one that works the best for me. But interesting to know, that cutscene also symbolised that 2 of those dog creatures, even though the torsos, like double-ended torso men, 2 of those things are now populating the world, and I know exactly where they are. They are on the tree near those shotgun shells I picked up, and in that shed, in the garage, the open garage on the roof, in really close to that tree as well. So there's 2 of those enemies in that area, and I'm going to bump into both of them. So if you've never seen them before, you're going to see something new here, guys, because it was new to me. Once again, though, you can run away from them very effectively, so it's not a problem. But open up the back of the van. Is there something in here? We got pistol bullets. We don't need them, though. Have we even fired our pistol yet, except for at the beginning where they forced it on us? I don't think we have. That's a big victory as well. We've played now for over an hour in Chapter 3, and the only times we fired our gun was during a mandatory fight against a new enemy that can kill you really quickly. And let's talk about that, shall we? So, the double-sided man. The Geminis. Let's call them Geminis, for lack of a better word. Oh my god, that was a witch coming out of the door. That was unfortunate. Witch on the left, witch on the right. It's a bloody witch sandwich. So, I'm going to run away from her because it turns out she's not a very good runner. And, I'm going to turn around this corner and she's going to give up chase. And you'll notice, this is Main Street. Do you see all those enemies that aren't here? All those crazy monsters that they threatened would be here and they're not here. It's the ultimate bait and switch. We just got baited, son. I love it. Good path though, right? Because you don't see anybody except for those two witches and they can just leave. But the Geminis. The face that has all the teeth is the fast face. And it will run at you from ridiculous distances and do a jumping attack that has some of the best tracking I've seen since Dark Souls 2. It is very rare that you will dodge the running attack, even at full sprint. So maximum sprint, it still hits you. Kinda bullshit, right? Consider how fast it is, how much range it has, and how just awkward it is. And then when you shoot it, and the other side is in charge, the other side will crawl towards you quite quickly, but slower than the other thing, and then when it gets close, it does a weird tail flip that flips the other head to hit you. And that's kind of what they do. And I believe that the design behind them is the idea that you want to stun them, and then damage them and move away from them while they're on the slow variant. But the slow variant is pretty fast too, so it just ends up being an enemy that is really fast for almost its entire existence, and all you really want to do is stun lock it with a shotgun and kill it in 3 shells, because it's the best way of doing it. But thank you for watching, guys. I hope that helped. We're now set to go out into the world and defeat the rest of the evil within, and I hope the videos help, and I hope you'll stay with me as we get through them. Thank you for watching. You take care now.